Hi guys, here we go with stress and emotion, and I believe this is linked to DB3 if you will, so we'll get there. Definitely informs us as to the assignment. So, stress and emotion, what do we know? Well, the human stress response, what can we say? Activates thoughts, feelings, right? Behaviors and physiological arousal that normally promote adaptation and survival. And our stress response can be adaptive in the short term, but prolonged it can be devastating to our mental and physical health. And it really is about the release of cortisol that suppresses our immune system and makes us more prone to infection over prolonged periods of stress. The simple formula is that the stress response is really best as a readily identifiable stressor that persists for a very short amount of time. Ill-defined or chronic stressors that persist over a long period of time really can play havoc with our immune system through immunosuppression. So a model of stress and appraisal, and this is kind of the thinking part of it, and I'm not going to belabor this. If you want to do more with this, we talk about it quite a bit in psychology of adjustment. But basically, there's four components to the process, and I know this looks like, oh my God, it's so confusing. Let's not be confused by it. Here is the deal. We have a stressor, and one of the things that we need to assess is the nature of the stressor. So the type of the stressor, is it environmental, is it psychological, is it social? And then we're going to assess things like how bad is it, how intense is it, how long is it going to last? Was it predictable? How often does it come? Right? And that's the cognitive appraisal, is the assessment of the qualities of the stressor. Now, typically, we combat stressors by relying on calling up our resources. And here is the resource box. So this can be physical resources like money. And note that a lot of stressors are not as stressful if you have the money to cover it, right? It's when we encounter a stressor that challenges us financially and we don't have the money, right? In that appraisal process, we would say, oh my God, my money is not up to the level of the stressor. I don't have enough to take care of this. Notice that's the appraisal process. It's a cognitive mechanism. Medical care, that is, if you find a lump somewhere on your body and you say, oh my God, I wonder what that lump is, but you don't have health insurance, you don't have access to a doctor, you don't have the money to pay for it, then that becomes far more stressful, that lump, than it would be if you had resources. Now, there's personal resources too, so your skills, your personal coping skills, right, and also your coping style. And then we rely on others quite often, many of us are social animals, right? So what is our support network, or what is our access to professional help? Right? So that's another appraisal. So two appraisals take place. That is, what's the stressor and what do I have available to me to help me deal with it? And then this person box, this is us, and this describes us. So we differ, right? We're individuals. Some of us are more robust. Some of us are less robust. Some of us are more laid back. Some of us are more uptight, right? Some of us are healthy. Some of us not so much. So, and some of us are from cultures that explain our relationship to the stressor differently than other cultures. So that's what comprises us. But here's the deal. Stressor, resources, right? We appraise, and then based on who we are, the possible reactions. And we see the physiological response, so we might see an increase in heart rate, a change in breathing, sweating. We see a behavioral response, which could be fight or flight, perhaps, and that's something we'll talk about later in the course. The subjective feelings, and that's probably the emotion box. But we really haven't gotten to defining that yet very well, have we? So we're just going to leave it at subjective feelings, but these are the feelings that well up in us and might provide us additional information about the nature of the stressor. And then the cognitive response is what we think about it. So that's the model, kind of in a nutshell. Let's not burden ourselves too deeply with that. But the chronic stressors are where we have our issues, our severe issues. They arise from our social and cultural environment. So how many people, how many of you guys get stressed out about work? I'm wondering what it's doing to you guys, right? Well, I got school on here somewhere. School, right? I'm wondering what it's doing to you guys, but then, that's school for you, it's work for us, and what's it doing to us when we have to consider all the work that we have to do to make these courses work under these novel circumstances, these COVID-generated circumstances, right? How many of you experience any kind of stress given your familial responsibilities? And it's cool to do this in class, right? Because, in class we have an enrollment of like 160 and we're in a big room and we get to all raise our hands and laugh at each other, etc. School, yeah, that's probably a stressor as well. Are you helping us out there, Annika? Okay, so she's got opinions about most everything. Money, how many people find money stressful? Yeah, many of us do. Either not enough or, interestingly, people who win the lottery, when they're interviewed post-lottery several years, many people wish they hadn't won the lottery because the money became too stressful. Right? Strange, huh? Relationships. Anyone find relationships stressful? Yeah, probably, huh? Something that most human beings are not big on is uncertainty, and there's actually a personality measure, right, that assesses this. Expectations, and I put expectations on the list. It's not commonly found, but expectations to me are stressful because if I put expectations on other people, then I get stressed because they might not meet those expectations. But if expectations are put on me, then I might become stressed because I'm afraid that I might not be up to the level of somebody else's expectations. But all of these are chronic stressors that can operate to suppress our immune system over a period of time and make us more vulnerable to illness. But that's not just it. Job stress defined is when the requirements of the job don't match the capabilities, resources, and needs of the worker. And how many times are we frickin' told, and I got a couple more work years under my belt than most of you guys do, and I've heard it time and time again, is we're going to have to do more with less. And what they're saying is, I'm going to provide you with more responsibilities, but I'm not going to increase the resources sufficiently for you to deal with those responsibilities. So we're caught in between, right, resources and responsibilities. They don't match up, and the result is that we experience stress. Now, NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, right, talks about this to a great extent, and we have stressful job conditions. Now, the individual factors we saw on that earlier, the components about you, and the situational factors combine. Now, what NIOSH says, though, is it doesn't just reduce your immunosuppression, cause immunosuppression. What it also does is make you more liable to have an accident. And that is because the stressors become distracting. And when we're distracted, then we're not attending to what we're doing to the same level, and we're more prone to accidents. So NIOSH really paints a picture. Not only is it a health issue, but an issue of accidents as well. And that's something, if you're going to be an employer, right, you have to consider that if you put people under stressful conditions, you're increasing the probability that they may, in fact, have an accident. And especially in industrial occupations and construction where you have to hurry or we got to get this done, it can be devastating to people's safety and, of course, their health. Now, the individual and situational factors can help to reduce the effects of stressful working conditions. And if you have a good balance between work and family or personal life, and I've been trying to take a day off every week this semester just because the workload is overwhelming and I really don't want to kill myself, in trying to meet that. So can I at least have a day where I'm not necessarily doing anything? I've been pretty successful with that, but I answer emails like every day. Maybe on that one day that I'm taking off, I only answer emails once during that day, during one period. But still, I think for a lot of teachers, it's really hard to take any time off during the semester, especially under our current conditions. Right? A support network of friends and coworkers. And again, I'll use ourselves as an example. We have a lecturers meeting now. Every Tuesday at 2 p.m. we do a lecture Zoom, right? And Cravens Brown leads our little meeting, and it's a long. We meet for an hour and a half, and almost everyone sticks it out. But it's really, really helpful for me to just be with my colleagues for that period of time, whether it's Dr. Supe or Dr. Beers or Dr. Myers, and the list goes on, just to share our experiences of the semester with each other. Not even counting the great tips and hints that we give each other, but just to share where we're at goes a long way to helping to reduce the stress. If you can take a relaxed and positive outlook, but that's a tough one, right? But notice that part of emotional intelligence includes the ability to do this. That is, I may in fact experience stressors which are causing physiological arousal. That is a change in my affective stream. And this affective stream is a term I'm going to start using more and more as we proceed through the class. So hang on. The affective stream is just the general level of arousal, right? The relaxed and positive outlook can help me reinterpret that, or not necessarily be controlled but observe it, catalog it, acknowledge it, but not necessarily allow it to have the same impact on me. More on that as we move through. But this is a NIOSH recommendation. Eat some strawberries, if you will. Good food, right? And those are strawberries in my backyard. Well, those aren't, because they've been eaten. So, perspective taking, this is another way to get at it. Long-term orientation. This is one of my dad's favorite pieces of advice to me. And he would say it, but he says it in Italian, right? Because he was an Italian American. He is first generation American of an Italian family. And he would say, tutto passa. And I'm like, I know, Dad. Tutto passa. And it simply means this will pass. So while it seems like you're knee-deep being buried by the stressor at this moment in time, more often than not, that will diminish. The stressor will diminish in its intensity, importance, or just disappear, right? We can also make downward social comparisons, and this is kind of shitty, but it does work, and that is you find someone whose situation is worse than yours, and you check them out and you say, oh my God, at least I don't have it that bad, right? And that can be somewhat of a relief, but unfortunately that then takes someone else to be in worse shape than us, and we probably shouldn't wish that on just about anyone. So, stimulus, let's start with the stimulus. This is the stressor, remember, and we're going to appraise it. So the appraisal process, there's a stimulus, we appraise it as a threat. Oh my God, so what are we going to do? Well, that's going to activate the fight or flight response for most animals, us included, right? So are we going to run like Forrest Gump, run like the Wind Forest, or are we going to stand, put our dukes up, and fight it out? Well, to facilitate either response, fight or flight, the body's going to go into high gear and it's going to release a bunch of hormones. Adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, oxytocin, all these are going to be released, and they're in service of preparing the body to better meet the stressor. So we're going to see our heart rate go up, we're going to see respiration go up, we're going to see fats and glucose, right, get burned for energy. We're going to see the blood flow leave the trunk and go to the extremities so we can get powerful and we can fight it out, right? We don't need to digest the hamburger right now because we got more important things to worry about. Notice when you're stressed, often for some of us it causes kind of indigestion problems. That's because the blood flow is leaving the stomach and going to the limbs, right? Perspiration goes up to cool us off. Nice feature for human beings is we are kind of evaporative cooling units, right? Most creatures, most mammals have to pant. We get to perspire. That confers an evolutionary advantage in some circumstances. But notice, the bottom one is what I've been referring to is the immune system becomes suppressed. Right? Now, and in honor of true flow charting, we have a decision that's represented in diamond, and we have the input that goes in. Let's say we ask the question in a diamond on a flow chart, does the threat subside? And the answer is no, the threat didn't subside. So the body says, well, if the threat didn't subside, if we haven't escaped, then we need more hormones released to, in fact, kick our body into even a higher gear. Notice that in a chronic stress situation, we get locked into this loop. And there's no escape, and the hormones are ever increasing, having the effect, but most importantly, suppressing the immune system. let's cut ourselves a break, right? Let's let the threat go away. Okay, so the threat subsides. Yes, it subsided. Whew, it's over. The hormone released now is acetylcholine, and the job is to bring all the other threat hormones back into line, back into the static point, right? So the threat hormone levels reduce, and the body returns to normal. Our experience of stress is now diminished. So we got to manage chronic stress, or we get into that loop of ever-increasing stress hormones. Right, Annika? Annika's favorite thing in the world is to chase Lucy, because Annika's about a year old, so she's a little asshole. Excuse my language. I'm probably used to it by now. But 1-year-old cats are terrors. Right? And poor Lucy, I don't know, Lucy's 8, 9 years old. She's the smallest cat in the house. And all the kittens, but you're not really a kitten, terrorize her. So, I don't know why. They just like to be mean. She'll get to about 2 years old and will stop. Lucy wishes it would stop now. So, let's look then more specifically at a smaller sub-mechanism in this process. And that is, we have a stressful event, and that registers through the through the amygdala to the hypothalamus. The amygdala is the seat of, some people call it the seat of emotion. I'm going to narrow that down a little bit. We've seen previous theories in this course now, where the amygdala becomes activated, sending messages to the hypothalamus, the electrochemical signals, if you will, neural impulses, to the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is then going to kick out the adrenal corticotropic hormone ACTH to the adrenal glands. That's what triggers the release of cortisol into the bloodstream and begins the immunosuppression system process. So it's this HPA axis that is all important in the stress response system. Now, so we got the HPA, and we can look at it visually if you want to. So what do we have then? We have the pituitary gland, right, and we have the cortisol being transmitted. The cortisol comes back to the hypothalamus, which is the blood testing laboratory, right, and it's going to then talk about the nature of the blood, and the brain's going to make decisions based on this. Ultimately, though, since we're talking psychology of emotion, maybe we should finally get there. Let's talk about the emotions activated in the HPA axis, so what we've just seen: anxiety, fear, and anger. Now, you guys are going to have to think in terms of your definition of emotion. You're going to have to think in terms of what constitutes basic emotions. I'm going to start to reveal my own thinking on this, but I'm hesitant to do so because I don't want it to necessarily influence other people's thinking. I'd like you to come to some of your own conclusions. But notice that these emotions thought to be activated in the HPA axis, probably represent then, at least for some theorists who maybe take a biological approach to understanding emotion, these might represent basic emotions: anxiety, fear, and anger. And note, we've studied a lot of philosophers at this point in time, and then we've studied early researchers for the most part. We haven't gotten, necessarily up in modern times yet. Well, I guess we have, but these might be considered by some basic emotions. So, more on the relationship between these three. So, what do we know? Well, under the threat of negative social evaluation, we can actually watch this process take place in the laboratory. So we bring in participants, we subject some to a condition of potential negative social evaluation, and then watch the levels elevate, which leads to the emotional output. Right? Now, positive social identity is another way to do this. That is, if we threaten someone's social identity or category membership, we can observe maybe the same mechanisms in the laboratory. The Trier social stress task, and this is where we see psychologists can be pretty nasty in the nature and the design of their studies, is given him. We bring participants in, and some are going to be randomly assigned a condition where they're told, look, you have to give a speech to an audience of evaluators. And so you give the participant a couple minutes to prepare the speech, and then the evaluators in the nasty condition are trained to look, well, critical, frustrated expressions. So what happens is, here you are, you got all these strangers there, you've been told you're being evaluated, and they're just giving you the look, man. They're like, are you serious? This is bullshit. Why am I even listening to you? Right? And then we we see, we can assess then the autonomic nervous system activation, that is the elevation of the stress hormones. Now, note that we had fear and anger on that previous slide. Right? We can differentiate fear and anger in the HPA axis, right? Participants exposed to the trieric task, so we expose them to the task, right? Then the cortisol level is measured. Participants self-report of fear and anger, which is one way to get at it. Maybe not the best, but anger is correlated with cortisol increase, but fear did not. And that's an interesting finding. Obviously, this is pretty relatively new research, so we have to think in terms of what's going to be discovered. But one of the most exciting things I think about researching emotion is we're still wide open. We're still on the frontier of understanding. Right? We don't even have a frickin' agreed upon definition of emotion. So I think it's awesome. Right? For a student of emotion, it might be a little less awesome. But for someone who just has a general interest in it, I'm fascinated. So, what do we know then? Well, the immune system suppression in illness, sickness behaviors are activated by the release of cytokines. And these include sleep and withdrawal behaviors. So, as this body senses that we're becoming sick, right? What happens is it naturally inhibits the desire to socialize, to explore, or to engage in aggressive behaviors because we have to enter into a resting state to heal ourselves. Right? Now, notice that this mechanism may be very similar to mechanisms that cause shame or embarrassment behaviors. Right? Again, a lot of work to be done here. I want to break here. This is the end of part 1. We're going to go to part 2, so stay tuned.